If you're anxious to get out of Ephesians, then you may not be encouraged to know that we're only doing one verse today. Ephesians 5:21. Ephesians 5:21. And when we get here, we usually go quick to verse 22. And sometimes skip 25 to the end of the chapter. If you're reading along, you see what I'm getting at. But I want to start off, and the reason I'm hitting verse 21 is for a couple of reasons. In verse 22 in the Greek, the word submit is not there. It's a carryover from verse 21. And I think a lot of times where we are at in church and in culture is I don't think we understand verse 21. And that's why we get confused from verses 22 all the way down to chapter 6, verse 9. If you look at that, those verses deal with the family, particularly the marriage relationship, the parent and child relationship, and where you work. Now, how many of us have those types of relationships in our lives? All of us. And so this goes all the way back to verse 18. The thought behind this is, do not get drunk with wine, which leads to reckless actions, but be filled with the Spirit. And then he says, has a few participles that come off of it. If you don't know what I'm just going to give you a little English lesson. A participle is something's got an ing on the end of it, okay? Is that good for you? Is that good? So ing on, that means something's happening, okay? And so we're speaking to one another, we're giving thanks, and then we're submitting. That's what you do when you're filled with the Spirit. Okay? So this is part of being full of the Spirit, which goes all the way back to being imitator of God as a dearly loved child. And no longer participating in deeds of darkness, but being in the light. And waking up into that and living that life. Okay? So summarized several months into several sentences. But anyway. So we look at verse 21. Now don't be afraid. I've got 5 other passages. Nicholas can testify to it because he's like, what are the scriptures for today? I'm like, get ready, my friend. This is to me the key of salvation. The key proponent of what God saved us for. And how we are to live and what it means to be Spirit-filled. I've been thinking about that all week. Is what is it? You hear a lot of different denominations that talk about the Spirit-filled life and being full of the Spirit. Well, what does that look like? Very few people want to say this. Okay, verse 21. And then I'll give you my title. Submitting to one another in the fear of Christ. So, subject or subject? There's a word, here's what I mean by this. There's a word spelled B-U-F-F-E-T. Now, what does that spell? We had 2 different words. You hear it? One person I was thinking of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27, where I buffet my body, and I'm going to bring it under the discipline, bring everything under control of Christ. That does not buffet my body. But it's spelled the same way. It depends on how you interpret it. And the same thing here. You've got this is a weird thing about English that drives people crazy from other countries. They don't. Here we have the word subject or submit, submit, subject. But is it subject or subject? Subject means that you're coming under. To subject is you're putting someone under you. And it's interesting that that is the two ways that we go. We either bring people in subjection to our will, or we submit ourselves to others. Okay? So what I want to speak to you about this morning is the two subjects, the two themes that are here that are just, and when I looked at this and I even my own way of thinking, I immediately, okay, so I'm going to be preaching on marriage. And the Spirit's like, you're missing something. You're missing something major here, Reagan. Go back. There are two key themes in the entire Bible here that are very, 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 very important. Submission and fear. If you don't get these two concepts, it's very hard to follow Christ. If you don't master these two ideas, you're going to struggle following Jesus all your days. Okay? So let's start with the first half of this scripture, submitting to one another. Not subjecting one another, but subjecting to one another. Coming under each other. Here's what it means to submit to the orders or directives of someone. Being under control of spirit, we are to be submitting to one another. Think of it in terms of military. You have people in chains of command and things of that nature. And so we are to come under each other's command. Now, there's a question that comes in my mind when I think of that. Well, if everybody's in submission to everybody, then who's in charge? The Lord. Amen. When no one asserts their will, then only God is in charge. That's the way he likes it. Because he's the only one that knows what's up. Or what's going on, or what, yeah. Sorry. All right. I've been hanging around kids all weekend, I apologize. All right, so he knows what's going on. He understands his will. He understands everything that's going on around you. He knows what's going on the other side of the planet right now. He is in complete control. You being in charge and calling the shots is not a good deal. Because even the oldest of it in here has only been, well, I bet you might get in trouble. Less than a century. Is that safe? Am I safe? But God's been here forever. Okay? So he knows. So submitting to him, but he doesn't say that, does he? You need to submit to one another. See, even when the Pharisees came to Jesus, they said, what is it? The greatest commandment. We'll love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul. But what did Jesus say? You're only asking for one, but I'm going to give you two. There's another one like it. Love your neighbor. See, we're all about loving God. I don't know about you, though. God's all good and stuff, but you're not. You know what I'm saying? And see, that's the deal. I can love God, right? Or I think I can. But I have a hard hard time loving you. But how can you love God whom you've never seen and hate your brother that you have seen? The love of God's not in you. If you'll go ahead and pull up Matthew chapter 20, I'm going to teach a little bit on this and what Jesus had to say about this. This was after, if you don't know this, you can go back and look. This is after James and John. There are several times where different accounts and different passages where different ones come and ask Jesus for favors. James and John were pretty known about this, and so they come and say, hey, can one of us sit at your right, one of us sit at your left? And everybody got mad, and and Jesus pulled all the guys together. This is a Reagan Reeves paraphrase version, okay? And so Jesus pulls all the guys together. He says, listen, hey, come here. Y'all all mad about who's going to be sitting at my right and at my left and all this stuff. And Jesus called them over and says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles dominate them. They subject people under their authority. This goes all the way back to Genesis with Nimrod. You know that Genesis 4 that you skip because it's this guy begat that guy who begat that guy who begat, you know what I'm talking about? Nimrod's in there, and he taught the world how you could conquer everybody and make them pay taxes and rule over everybody. He's the first guy that ever did that. And so that's how the Gentiles do. They dominate them, and the men of high position exercise power over them. Let's go to the next one. It must not be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Next. And whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. 28. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. So what Jesus said is, here we go. Who's going to be in charge? Who's in charge of this thing? No. He said, that's how the world operates. But what you need to learn is how to be a servant. And the model that I'm going to give you for that is myself. Because when I came as Lord, and rightly so, and teacher, rightly so, master, rightly so, Son of God, rightly so, when I came, I did not come into a palace. I did not, hey, you, wash my feet. That's not how he came. When he came as a servant. And when he didn't come to receive things, he came to give. And to give his life as a ransom for many. That's your model. Here's your leader, here's your master, here's your Lord, and the way he's coming is not with an iron fist, but a lowered neck. It don't make sense. Why would the first make himself last? That's not the way we do things. But this is what we're called to do. Then we're going to go to John 13:34. So that's what we're supposed to do. But what is the motivation that God desires? What was his motivation? What is our motivation in serving? Why? So instead of leading, I'm leading, but I'm serving, which is weird. But so if I'm doing, what is my motivation behind that? I'll give you a new command. So, they wanted one, they got two, and then Jesus added a third. A new command I give you, love one another. Just as I have loved you, you must also love one another. And this is how men will know, verse 35, that you are my disciples. If you have love one for another. So the motivation behind our service is not to do things. The motivation is need. Yesterday I'm sitting there and I'm at a track meet, and I'm going to go get me some water right after this kid gets done with this. When kids are in races. Well, guess what? Kids are always in races. So I'm out there and hadn't drank anything for a couple hours. And so here comes Hannah, and she's like, here. She has a sandwich, and she's got water. Now, why did she do that? Because she was trying to manipulate me because she won $20? No. Right? The motivation, we hope, is love. It wasn't done to manipulate. It wasn't done to contrive. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Hannah. So it wasn't that she said, I'll hear about it later. She did that for the purpose of just taking care of my need. Does that make sense? You do that for people that you love. That's what you do with your body, which we get down when we talk about the husband loving his wife. You take care of yourself. It's the same type of submission. My body, I did some things I wasn't supposed to do yesterday, and so now my arm hurts. It's not happy with me. So my whole body is accommodating my right arm. Everything is adjusted. I couldn't even pick up my coffee cup. I was such a wimp. So my left hand comes, come on, buddy, I'll help you out. I'll help you out, but it's hard. And nobody's whining. Well, they're whining, but, you can't hear it. And so, that's just the way it is. Your stinking right arm, grow up, get bigger. No, that's not the way you treat yourself. If we're members of Christ and we're members of his body, that's how we take care of each other. It's a service out of love towards one another. That's why we've been talking about building ourselves up in love, growing in love. Why? Because that's the basics behind what we do. And if we lose that, then we've lost what we are. We've become an organization that does social good. Just like the church in Ephesus that did so many good things, but they lost their love. That's in Revelation chapter 2 or 3, in that range. There's 7 churches there. So anyway, we have to be careful. And Paul's warning us here, listen, you got to submit to each other and understand, especially with teaching from a rabbi, you're expected to have a basic knowledge of everything in Hebrew school. By age 12, you're supposed to know the entire law. So if I reference something in Psalm, you should be able to quote the whole Psalm to me. That was just regular 12-year-old Hebrew school. So there's a knowledge and an expectation that when I'm speaking to you about submission, you remember most everything about submission in the Bible. Because God expects you to remember that. Just like I still remember the things that my daddy used to tell me. I'm 46 years old. And I still remember the things that he told me to do. And then I obeyed for fear of punishment. Now I obey just to honor him. See what I'm saying? And so you should remember what your Heavenly Father tells you. And I get ahead of myself. Now, so love, motivation of service, what does that present? I've already said it. Servant leader. Which leads us to another passage. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Let me travel. Traveling. Is it there? There it is. Okay. Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. 29. All of you take up my yoke and learn from me. And how is he? Gentle and humble in heart. Now, I may get in trouble for this, but I'm kind of used. Now, think of our presidents. And some of us have been a little bit around longer than others. When you think of our presidents, and we can be a little loosey-goosey here. You can go to other countries. Do you think of any presidents that are humble and gentle in heart? Do you think of any leaders? Do you have any bosses that were that way? Here's the God of all the universe. He says, I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you should learn from me. Why? Because you'll find rest for yourselves. You've got all these burdens and all these worries, and I'm God of all the universe, and I sleep like a baby if I needed to. Because I'm not burdened at all, because I'm humble and I'm gentle. Oh, let's get 30. Let's do one more. You got 30 there? 30 there. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Okay? So understand, servant leader is humble, someone who leads, but whose heart is humble and submissive. So what does that mean? The easiest example of that is Christ himself. When he stood before his accusers who falsely accused him, he did not open his mouth. He humbly became obedient unto death, even death on a cross. When he stood before Pilate, he simply spoke truth, probably could have gotten off, but didn't push to be appealed, willingly took the cross. That is humility and gentle. Well, that's what the world does. It just walks all over you and uses you and abuses you. Then why are you upset? If you know these things, then why are you burdened by it? I tell you why. Because we don't understand fear. What is fear? We talk about reverence to the Lord. Why do we submit to each other? Why should I submit to you? Why should you? Well, I'm not going to submit to him. He don't know nothing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, he ain't going to submit to her. I just don't like that person. They stink. Well, you don't submit to them because of them. You submit to them out of fear of Jesus. Okay? Now, what does that mean, and what does fear look like? Fear, a profound respect or awe for a deity. Okay? Now, let's go back. We got to go way back to Exodus chapter 20, verse 20. And what happens on this day is that Moses tells the Israelites, they've already gone through the Red Sea, they come through the desert, they come to this mountain. And God says, I'm going to be here in 3 days. You need to get yourselves ready because I'm showing up. Okay? So okay. Let's see what this looks like. So now don't touch the mountain or you'll die, right? It's a given. So people gather around the mountain, they wake up. Again, and God's punctual, Brother Tommy. He's there early. They all get out of the tent. And the mountain is on fire. You actually go on Google Earth and you find the mountain, it's got a charred top. It's cool. Okay? You got a burnt top. Because God came down, and so you've got fire, you've got smoke, you've got lightning, you've got thunder, and okay, well, yeah, I'm with you now, and trumpets. When's the last time you had a thunderstorm here? Beep, beep, beep. Okay? And so, imagine walking out and looking at that, and then some guy says, okay, now step closer. No! And so they all step up. And then, here we go. And then from that, there's no person, there's no form, nothing. Just I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make any. He goes through the whole 10 Commandments. Speaking from the mountain with trumpets in the background, lightning, thunder. I mean, he had the whole full effects going, baby. I just boom, bah, boom. Okay? And so, so what was the reaction here? When they come to they come to Moses, he was a type. They come to Moses and said, we don't want that to happen anymore. We don't want that to happen anymore. You go to God and talk or something. You come tell us what he said, because we won't do that no more. That scared us to death. And this is Moses' response. Okay? Moses responded to the people, do not be afraid, for God has come to test you, so that you will fear him and not sin. Fear means fear. That's what it means. And it laughs sometimes, some of the commentaries, well, fear means fear. And there is a God that created all things. There is a God who's going to destroy all things. Amen, he's coming. Psalm 2, kiss the Son, lest he become angry, turn and destroy you. That's what it says. Okay? Fear. A reverential fear. If you need to be afraid to come to Christ, be afraid. But you understand, just like with a parent, you understand they're disciplining you not to destroy you, but for your good. Right? And so why? Because the basic behind it is what? The motivation, look at your scriptures, is love. The purpose of those commands was not, I'm going to destroy y'all if y'all break them. That's not the purpose of the commands. The purpose of the commands was to keep them in fellowship and relationship with him. Don't confuse it with all the things that you're told and that you understand. Look at it for what it is. Go all the way back to Exodus 20:20, and God wants you to fear him so that you don't offend him. It's like in any relationship. There are things that you might want to say and might want to do, but you know it's going to offend somebody, or you're not going to be able to, be in that relationship if you do that. It's not that you don't have the desires to do it. It's just a greater desire to do something better. And that's what we're talking about. Are you following me? It's not just a fear of what may come, a fear of what may not come. What happens if I don't follow Christ in faith? What happens if I miss him? They sinned twice, if you remember back then. The first one was, 30 days later or something? When Moses came down, they built the Baal. You remember, Baal of Peor? That was a sin of commission, right? And then they get to the waters, to the Jordan, they send some spies in, and then they omit. They don't do what God told them. They didn't have enough faith. That's how that works. And sometimes we can miss God, not just by doing something wrong, but not doing what's right. Okay? So, it's pride what makes us assert our will. You remember what they wanted to do to Moses? Well, first they thought he died up there for 30 days. God's up there, fire, smoke, and all that stuff. He probably got burned up there. I mean, it's legitimate thought. I mean, it even says in the text. I didn't tell you in 21, it says, and so the people and Moses walked right into the flames. And it's nuts. I mean, he just, just walks into the fire. He didn't show up. I guess he died. Well, then he comes back. And not good. Okay? Not good at all when he showed up. And so, but again, they get to the other place, and what happens? We don't want to do that. Who is this Moses and Aaron? We didn't establish them as authorities over us. Who is this Joshua and Caleb saying we can go in there? Let's stone those gentlemen, elect our own leaders, and let's go back to Egypt. They heard his voice. Fear. The whole generation died out. Psalm 111:10. And I picked this one instead of the Proverbs one. Psalm 111:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his instructions have good insight. His praise endures forever. Okay? You ever been driving along, just listen to the radio, KSBJ or something, and just and if it's going and everything's great, and then you see brakes start hitting, you know what I'm saying? Like Christmas lights. And you're like, oh, there's a cop up there. And you're like, what's the speed limit on this road anyway? Do you ever do that? Gary, come here. He's a cop. He's a cop. Anyway, so, where's that? Where'd he go? Hush, Reagan. Okay. So, anyway, why do you do that? You're afraid.